Welcome to A Cup of Gratitude with Amanda Schaefer. Hi, I'm your host, and I'm so glad you stopped by. This podcast is really for anyone, anywhere, anytime. And it's about taking a moment to slow down and look around and actually see all of the good things that are there. There's no question that asks, is your cup half empty or half full? But I think a better question is, what's in your cup? I mean, a drop of gratitude will benefit your life unimaginably more than a full cup of anything else. So let's settle in and take a look at how we can shift our focus and embrace the joy and the wonder of the life that we have. And once you start, you won't be able to stop seeing the good. And just like me, you won't be able to stop talking about it. And somehow that creates even more. Even in the midst of difficulty, even when it's really hard. Learn how to drink from a cup of gratitude. Welcome. Today I'm speaking with Mary Spencer Veazey, who is a Georgia native known for infusing her writing with relatable and uproarious storytelling, coupled with profound truths about Jesus. She lives in Nashville, Tennessee with her cat Confetti and is the engagement manager for Daystar Counseling Ministries. Mary Spencer is a proud graduate of both Auburn University and Belmont University, and she got a BA and an MBA in those two places. I am really excited to welcome her today. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to our conversation. You know, I talk to somebody almost every day, either doing a pre-recording call or a recording. And I am, as I always say, the luckiest girl. And yes, I'm saying girl, not old lady. I am the luckiest girl because I get encouraged by these stories. Each one is so different. Each one has such great value and a perspective that sometimes I need to hear. And I really enjoyed our pre-recording call. And I remembered your outlook in life and the way that God worked through who you are and now who he serves through your obedience to wanting to share him. And it's just a beautiful thing. So, as most people know who listen to the podcast, I do things just a little differently here. I like to start at the beginning and look at our childhood all the way up to what we're doing now. And I think that when we do that, we're able to see things that we might have missed, to find blessings along the way, things that God was saying, times where maybe we didn't know he was there and he was there. And sometimes it brings healing, and sometimes it brings an encouragement, even to the person sharing their own story. Again, I'm so fortunate to be able to get to be a part of this and for God to have allowed me to hear so many of his children's stories, because each one has so much power, each one has so much value, and each one is so beautiful.
Yeah, it's so good. Yeah, I'm excited to share today. And I was telling you earlier, I was like, I don't get to share often my full story, so I'm excited to share that today.
Yeah, I think the whole story is so important because here's the
Yeah.
thing, Mary, even though you're a lot younger than I am, you're very accomplished for your age. And so someone might look at you as a Christian, as someone that they see as accomplished, and without knowing your whole story, might not be able to fully believe that they can do what God's calling them to do. And I think
Yeah.
when we share our whole story, we share the transformation we've been through, we share the goodness of who God is. And I think we're also encouraging others to step out into what he's calling them to.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. A lot of what has happened in my life, especially the last few years, it's been such a leap of faith that I don't think I would have done without the Lord's hand in it,
Yeah.
or have been able to accomplish, period. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's really cool to look back and go, wow, all along, even in the
Mm-hmm.
hardships, God has really blessed my life.
Mm-hmm. Amen. And that's how we carry hope to other people, right?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
connect because each story is different. And so you have people that you're meant to connect with, I have people I'm meant to connect with, and we can carry that hope and carry his presence to them and and show them that he is exactly who he says he is.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah. So, with all of that in mind, would you be willing to tell us a little bit about your childhood?
Yeah, yeah. So I grew up in a small town in South Georgia. I have a really big extended family in my hometown. My dad has four brothers. My mom has a brother. And they all live in my hometown. My grandparents live in my hometown. So I grew up with a lot of love. I have two awesome parents that are believers and a
Mm-hmm.
younger sister who's a believer too. So I grew up in the church. and got to know the Lord from a really young age. And yeah, it was just a really sweet childhood. I grew up playing outside all the time, and me and my sister would make up stories with our neighbors and act out stories. And we were really creative from a young age, and we would run around in the creek in the backyard. It was just a really great childhood kind of ideal. And my mom was very, very adamant. We would play outside and we would not be on, screens and TV and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we learned
Yeah.
from a really young age, we better get creative and we better get outside because my mom's not going to be putting up with us just sitting around. So I'm really grateful for that.
And that's awesome. I grew up before there were screens, and
Right.
so I didn't have a choice, but I raised my kids the same way. I think it's so important to be able to interact with nature, to see
Yeah.
what's going on outside. The way that God created things, there are actually things in the dirt that when you touch the dirt are good for your brain and your
Yeah.
emotions. He everything is so much more than we can ever think or imagine. And even in its fallen state, there's still so much goodness that we miss out on when we're sitting in front of a screen.
Yeah.
Um, and I think
Totally.
too, like we are not meant to know all the things, right? You're not supposed to know all of the news happening all over the world all at one time. Our
Right.
brains, I don't think they can handle it.
No, my brain just turns to mush trying to compute everything. And yeah,
Yeah.
I've had to return kind of to my childhood state of like, okay, I'm gonna either not be on Instagram at all or
Hmm.
have it deleted off my phone and just check it when I need to on my computer because
Yeah.
I feel like I'm just getting so swept up in what is happening in the world that I'm missing out on what God has right in front of me. So I'm really trying to take a step back and go, okay, can I get back to childhood Mary Spencer, play
Hmm.
outside? See wonder again like I used to when I was younger before, the world kind of
Yeah.
scarrets with different things. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's really important.
Yeah, good for you. What I do is with social media, I put the good stuff about God out there, and then I
Yep.
retreat. I
Yep.
don't sit and scroll. And so, but I agree. I think, there's something about the awe and wonder of being his child
Yeah.
that it doesn't matter how old you are, you're his child, right? And so I was just talking to someone about this at a small group yesterday, how my posture changes when I worship God. I
Mm.
can't help it.
Yeah.
I'm throwing my shoes off and getting down on the ground, or I'm jumping up on top of something. And it's because when I worship him, I instantly am reminded that I'm his child and I'm reminded of who he is. And
Yep.
it kind of like realigns you, I think.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah, I think something about being outside, being in the dirt, or even I grew up around horses and cows and, all sorts of different wildlife and animals. And just being in that kind of environment brings you back to, okay, look at what God's created and how
Yeah.
it's good and how we need this to sustain life. And yeah,
Hmm.
I think it's nice to every once in a while go back to my hometown that's way smaller than Nashville and kind of be reminded of what life is like when it's stripped away from all that a big city can be.
Yeah. Now, when you and I were talking during our pre-recording phone call, we had
Mhm.
talked about the fact that you said you were really a rule follower,
Yes.
and you also mentioned loving books. And you told me a little story that I'd love for you to share, if you will,
Yeah.
about the book that you were reading in the bathtub.
Yes, yes. So growing up, I loved reading books. I always had a book on hand and I loved to read in the bathtub. And I had checked out a book from school and was reading it in the bathtub and had accidentally dropped it in the bathtub and it was soaking wet and it was completely ruined. And
Mm.
me being a rule follower, I was like, I am gonna get in so much trouble at school tomorrow. I was so worried. And my mom was like, it's really fine. We'll buy another book for the school. It's, a $10 book.
Hmm.
And I got to school and I told my teacher, and then my teacher and the headmaster pulled me outside of class, and I was like, I'm gonna get in so much trouble. I'm never gonna pulled out of class. And so, it was my first time of getting pulled out of class, and I get out there and they're like, we are just so impressed that you were reading in the bathtub. Like, no worries at all that you dropped it in the bathtub. It's totally okay. And I was just sobbing, like, I'm so sorry. So yes, had a big passion for books and a big passion for not getting in trouble. So when those two collided,
Yeah.
it was quite interesting in third grade.
Well, I love that story for many reasons, but one of the reasons is that their response is not what you expected.
No,
And so it shows you that like we all have like this internal dialogue
yeah,
that we're running by, and oftentimes God's response is not what we're expecting.
Yes, I
It's
did not
very
expect that.
much like them. Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
wow, I just love you and I'm so excited about what you're doing. I'm not upset.
Yes, yes, it was
Yeah.
very gracious. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you told me that you remember wanting to do the right thing like all the time, though, that this
Yeah.
was kind of a recurring thing. Do you think that that came from your parents? Do you think that there's any place you can think of that maybe made you feel that way, or was that just something you took upon yourself?
I think I just took it upon myself. I did not feel any pressure from my parents to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
They were pretty relaxed parents, and I think I just wanted to be seen as somebody that was doing things right, that didn't get in trouble, that didn't cause trouble, that
Mm-hmm.
could excel in all the different facets. And I think once I got to college, I kind of realized, wow, I'm kind of burnt out on always feeling like I
Mm.
put on this face to do the right thing, and I just want to be me.
Yeah.
And a lot of who I am is wanting to do the right thing. I think that just comes from like knowing the Lord better. But yeah, I definitely had this pressure of like I want to check off the list that I am accomplishing what I need to accomplish, that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, that I'm following what God says. And my relationship with God to start was more of like a checklist because I didn't understand
Mm-hmm.
how a God could just love me with no strings attached.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it stemmed from that.
Yeah. And that's why I wanted you to answer because I think sometimes the thought that God loves us unconditionally
Yeah.
or the thought that while we were sinners, Jesus came to die for us, the
Yeah.
thought that, even for me, the thought that, we were given choice and we chose incorrectly.
Hmm.
And I always think about, well, the angels were given choice and some of them went the wrong way as well, but God didn't send Jesus for them. Like he made us family.
Yeah.
He made sons and daughters, and so
Right.
he made us in his image, and he made us with his hands and his breath, and so his connection to us really is father.
Yeah.
And I think it's just really hard to believe, even when you have good parents, right,
Hmm.
that someone out there could love you no matter what and love you just the way you are, want the best for you, but love you
Yeah.
completely, you know?
Yeah. 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 That's hard to accept, especially as a kid where, you've learned that nothing is free, and
Yeah.
it's a hard concept to grasp. And it took me a long time to fully understand that and accept that, and let God fully love me as I
That's
am.
hard for adults to grasp.
Yeah.
It's not
Oh,
just
yeah.
hard for kids,
Yes.
and
Yes. I still
um
struggle with that.
yeah, and here's the thing. I think too, you had a faith, you went to church, you went to a Christian school, and so
Mhm.
a lot of times, whether they mean to or not, different places have lots of rules and traditions that
Yeah.
get mixed in, and that was my issue. I never met God nor Jesus, and I didn't really think they were real
Yeah.
because they were supposed to love me and care about me and all these things, and all I ever saw was kind of ritual. We went somewhere for an
Mhm.
hour,
Yeah.
and that so I quickly had written God off as just a mean old man as a little kid because of
Mhm.
some of my story.
Yeah.
I wish I would have known better, known differently, known that he was available to me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's hard to, yeah, to fully understand that. And I feel like once I got to college and I went to a school where I didn't know anybody, that I was like, okay, I have nobody to rely on but the Lord. So
Hmm.
I'm gonna put my faith in you because I don't really have faith in anything else right now.
Hmm.
And that's kind of when my relationship began. But yeah, it is hard to accept.
Yeah. Now you had told me that around middle school time, there were
Hmm.
some things that were happening that were difficult,
Yeah,
problematic.
yeah. Yeah, I when I got to middle school, as many young girls experience, it was hard. Girls were mean. It's kind of when
Hmm.
everybody's changing. And
Hmm.
I in seventh grade, there was just a lot happening, and my grandfather had lung cancer and was not doing well, and it was just a hard time in my family with so much going on. And girls were just being mean at school. And I remember after my grandfather passed away in seventh grade, this girl in my class that was one of my best friends, she didn't come to the funeral. Nobody came to the funeral, the visitation, and my sister and all my cousins had friends come. And, that was
Mm.
just really hard as a seventh grader to go, do I even have any friends? And I remember at my sister's school play, this girl that I thought was my best friend looked at me and said, "Nobody cares about your dead grandpa." And
Wow.
yeah, and that just rattled me to my core because I thought she was one of my really good friends. And just to hear that, I mean, I
Yeah.
just lost him probably a week prior, and it was just hard. And I really, really struggled and decided the next year to switch things up. And I went from tiny private school to a big public school for eighth grade. And it was definitely a different experience, but I'm really glad that I had that break because I made so many great friends at that public school that are still my good friends to this day. And it was
Hmm.
a good breather. But I ended up going back to that private school for high school. But yeah, middle school was just brutal. It was hard
Yeah.
to understand why girls would be so mean,
I
why boys
don't
were so
get
mean.
it.
Yeah.
I don't. I think there's this spirit of competition.
Yes,
I
totally.
don't know why it's bred into us from a young age, but it really is. And that's the thing I see a lot in Christian creative culture is
Yeah.
that like I try to be really clear that we need to be linking arms, supporting one another. There's
Yeah.
room for everyone. God's given each one of us something very specific to do, even if it's similar to someone else. It's its own thing, and
Yeah.
to show the world that we can get along. We're supposed to be sisters in Christ. So every now
Yeah.
and then you'll see somebody acting worldly, but most of the time I think that's how we show the world we're a little different. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, girls are mean, women are mean, just like in general.
Yeah.
But I think the world's been mean to us,
Totally. Yes.
you know?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it was tough. It was just a lot going
Yeah.
on. And, at the same time I've got braces and, I've got
Yeah.
freshly highlighted hair and all the things. And so it was
Hmm.
just it's hard when
Yeah.
you have a lot of internal changes going on and then, your
Yeah.
external changes with friends and not
Yeah.
really sure who you are. But yeah, high school was still hard in a different way, but I felt like I found some pretty good friends. Wasn't quite sure where I fit in because I wasn't a
Hmm.
party girl. I didn't drink. I didn't, do all the things a lot of high schoolers do. And I felt kind of left out. But I knew that I wanted to stand firm on what I believed was right and what was right for me.
Hmm.
And that was hard. And I am really grateful to myself that I did that. And I wish I'd had more compassion for myself at that age of like, okay, you're doing what
Yeah.
you feel is right for you. Be glad that you're doing that. Don't have regrets about that because I'm really proud of myself now. But yeah, high
Yeah.
school is hard to kind of
Hmm.
muddle through when you don't feel like you're fitting in with what everybody else is doing.
And here's the thing, when you're in high school, you feel like that's the most important time of your life, and
Right.
you realize like a year out,
Yeah.
sometimes sooner, that you're probably not going to see most of those people ever again, and that nobody was fully formed. Your brain wasn't even fully
Right.
formed, and yeah. So,
Yeah, it is.
uh,
It's interesting, and I feel like too. I've had a unique experience post high school where a lot of the people that were in my graduating class of 55 have become my good friends. And as we've gotten older,
mhm.
those things just don't matter anymore. And yeah, it's been cool. It's been kind of redemptive, honestly, to go, okay, look at all these people that have become like my good friends
Yes.
that, I didn't feel like I fit in with as necessarily in
Mhm.
high school. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And here's the thing, they were going through all the same feelings you were.
Right,
That's why
right.
probably people were mean because, if you lash out first, then maybe you
Yeah,
won't get hurt.
right.
But, back in my day, we didn't have social media. So it's weird for
Lucky.
me. Well,
Yep.
yeah, yeah, I'm really glad we didn't because I was
Uh-huh.
not a Christian and there would be probably things following me around for the rest of my life. But I ended up sharing them anyway,
Yeah.
because God said be open. But one of the things that's been really cool is once kind of old people were allowed on Facebook and Instagram and things like that, is that
Yeah.
I've reconnected with a lot of people that I went to high school with. And what's really cool is when they'll read one of my books or listen to the podcast and or even just talk about our faith that we both have now that we didn't have then. It's really interesting to meet them
Yes.
as this adult person who has, a life that's completely different than what I remember in high school.
Right. Yeah. I've had a similar experience. That's one of the best parts of social media is seeing people that I grew up with. And what they're doing now and how they've, become moms and dads and
Yeah.
how different life is. But yes, it's cool to see the other side of, okay, here's the people I knew in high school and now people change and yeah,
Hmm.
it's been cool to watch my friends from high school grow into these
Yeah.
parents and wives and husbands. So yeah.
Yeah. Now, you had told me when you went to college, you
Mhm.
pledged sororities and you
Yeah.
got into one. You want to tell us a little bit about what that was like?
Yeah, I had really no idea what to expect. I thought sorority rush would be, an awesome experience. It would be pretty easy. I can talk to a brick wall, so I didn't think I would have any
Hmm.
problems. And I've quickly realized that was not the case. I didn't know anybody in any of the sororities. I was out of state, didn't have anybody looking out for me. I didn't realize how much that would matter. And
Mm.
I went through Rush, and the first round was fine, and then the second round, I think it was the second round, I got cut from all but two sororities, and I remember staring at the page and going, "Is this real? Like, is this actually? There's 18 sororities, and now I'm down to two. How did this happen?"
Yeah.
And on the last round of Rush, I only had one sorority. So normally when you wake up on the bid day, it's you don't know which sorority you've gotten. You've, ranked two or three. And I knew exactly what I was getting because I only had one. And I felt weird about it because I was like, okay, God, did you just close every door so I would end
Mm.
up in the exact right one? Or does nobody want me and this is all I've got left? And is this going to be a good experience? And I felt like God really nudged me to go and try it out and give it a shot. And I ended up loving it. And
Mm.
I had an incredible experience and got to be in charge of the new members. My junior year, I got to be in charge of the freshmen, which was such a full circle experience because I had so many girls look at me and go, I didn't have another choice. Like, this is the only sorority I got. And I got to say, yeah, me too. And look, now
Yeah.
I'm getting to be, holding your hand through this. And yeah, my
Hmm.
sorority was awesome. I had so much support from them throughout my 4 years, and it ended up being a great experience. But at the start, it was like everybody got what they wanted, it felt like, and everybody loved their sorority. And I even remember posting on Instagram being like, I got exactly what I wanted, so excited to be here. And I was crying in my bed right after I
Huh.
pledged the sorority. So you know,
Yeah.
I now in hindsight, I'm like, okay, you can't believe everything you see on social media because I was even guilty of doing that as an 18-year-old. But yeah, it ended
Yeah.
up being a really, really sweet experience. And there weren't a ton of, my sorority wasn't the classic full of Christian girls sorority. There were definitely believers in my sorority, but I got a
Hmm.
wide array of girls that were believers, girls that weren't believers, girls from all over the country, some of the smartest girls I've ever met. So it was really neat. It's I love that I got to be in such a hodgepodge of a sorority because the girls in my sorority were awesome. It was just a great experience.
Yeah. I mean, you said in the beginning, I wonder whether it was just what happened or did God close the other doors? And it
Yeah.
sounds like God closed the other doors.
Yes. He tends
Yeah.
to do that in my
Yeah.
life.
It does that in a lot of lives, you know.
Yeah.
And sometimes he closes the doors and the windows and it's
Yeah.
like, hey, it's a time of rest.
Yes.
What? No, thank you. I don't want to be hidden away right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he always knows what's best for us. And it sounds to me like you got to meet such a variety of people. Now, you had told me that there was this point in time where before you had met a lot of people in college, you actually set out to meet more people, which I think is pretty awesome. And
Yeah.
you did a thing where you're going to have lunch with a stranger every week for 16 weeks. So
Yeah.
how did that go?
Yeah. It was, as an extrovert, it was still kind of scary to go, okay, how am I going to find a stranger to go to lunch with every week?
Yeah.
And, are people going to think I'm weird? But I just decided, okay, in January, my freshman year, I want to have more friends. I have a
Hmm.
few, but not a ton. And so I'm just going to ask girls in my classes. I'm going to ask girls that I meet in line for chicken salad chick. I'm just going to ask people to meet with me wherever I see somebody that looks like a nice person. So
Hmm.
I did it for 16 weeks and it was awesome because some of the girls became my best friends to this day, lived with my senior year of college, have been in a couple of their weddings. And then there were some that we had a great lunch together and then we never hung out again. And that was totally
Right.
okay. And we
Yeah.
would wave to each other when we would see each other on campus. But yeah, it was a really neat experience because so many of the girls I met with would go, "I'm so glad that you asked me to lunch. I've felt really lonely and like I don't have a ton of friends and I just don't know how to meet people." And it reminded me of how we're all in the same boat. And even if you
Mm-hmm.
come from a city where there's tons of kids going to the college or going to, you can still
Mm-hmm.
be lonely and not have that person that you want to be your best friend. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was awesome. I'm so glad I did that, and I want to do that more often. I need to do that
It
more.
is awesome. I think it would make for a great book, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
You
Oh,
know,
yeah, that's a great idea.
like
Yeah,
chronicle the different lunches and like,
yeah. I like that. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
very cool.
Hey, you may have got my next book deal figured out for
There
me.
you go. I can't tell you how many people I've given them book titles. Apparently, I'm good at it. I don't know.
Hey, I'll keep that in mind. I'll be calling you shortly.
Well,
That's a
as I said, I love helping in any way. It's just the way my mind works, though. But as you were talking about it, I thought, wow, what a neat experiment. And I think anytime that we're intentionally connecting, or you could even give somebody the idea to intentionally set out to do something,
yeah,
think about the repercussions on the positive side of that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I love that idea. That's a great idea. Okay, my wheels are turning.
Okay. Well, you and God figure that out, but I would definitely read it. I think it's cool. So
Yeah.
in your junior year, your sister actually came to the same college with you, and
Yep.
by senior year, you had told me that you changed your major 4 times. What'd
Yep.
you end up like landing on?
Yes, yes. I landed on public relations
Uh-huh.
and I didn't even know what that was before I got to college, but I it's funny that they don't do this anymore, but when I was in college, you had to carry your folder of all your records to the college that you were transferring your major to. And
Uh-huh.
so I did that walk of shame 3 or 4 times. And, people knew if you were carrying the orange folder, you were changing your major. So it was hilarious that I had to do it so often, but I remember the third major that I was in was to become a child life specialist, which I still think I would have loved, but I was so worried about being in a career where I only had one option of what to do for a job. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I just don't think that's right for me. And so I printed out a list of all the majors at Auburn, and I sat in the library one afternoon and marked through each one and was like, okay, don't want to be an aerospace engineer, don't want to be in math, like gonna mark these out. And then I had, I think, one or two left, and one of the ones that I had left is public relations. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that means, but it sounds kind of fun. So I Googled it, and it's a lot of what I already do, talking to people, writing press releases, writing
Mm-hmm.
blogs. Like there's a lot of writing and being like a public spokesperson involved in that. And I thought,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I think I'm already doing that naturally outside of
Yeah.
school. So maybe this would be a good fit for me. And I loved my classes. I had the best professors. The people in my classes were very similar to me, extroverted, uh,
Mm-hmm.
had such fun people in my classes. So I landed on the right major, but it took me a long time to get there. So I'm grateful I got there.
Well, yeah, it sounds like a very good fit. Now, you
Yeah.
ended up applying to a post-grad program in Nashville,
Uh-huh.
and you moved there not knowing anyone. I'm wondering, did you do the stranger lunchtime thing there, or what'd you do?
Yes. Yeah. So when I got here, it's funny. I keep moving places where I don't know anyone, and I'm hoping
Mm-hmm.
that this is the last place I move where I don't know anyone because it's so hard to start over. But it was awesome. I got here August 2019 and didn't really have any friends. And I said, okay, maybe let's go back to our roots. Let's get lunch with a stranger again. And the first girl that I got lunch with, she was a barista at the coffee shop that I frequented when I first moved here. And we got lunch and really hit it off. And I actually ended up being in her wedding. So it was so funny because, I never thought that I would hang out with the barista at my coffee shop, but we became such great friends and had so much in common. And so I kept
Mm,
meeting with strangers and having lunches. And it's harder in adulthood because life
yeah,
is a lot busier and you're working 9 to 5 and then you're tired after work. So it's different making friends as an adult. But I feel like it took me a lot longer to get to really deep friendships as an adult versus college because college you're in this bubble and you're all
mm-hmm.
doing the same thing, and then you get to adulthood and
Yeah,
everybody's doing something different. I have friends that are night nurses. I have friends that travel all the time for work, so it's hard to connect. And so those
it
moments,
is.
yeah, where you get to hang
Yeah.
out with your friends are really special as an adult.
Yeah, there's popping to mind. I don't know if you ever heard of the turquoise table, but there
Mm.
was a woman who she wrote a book and some other things based on it, but she was an adult and moved to a new neighborhood and was trying to get to know her neighbors, and that wasn't happening. So she painted this picnic table turquoise, and instead of putting it in the backyard, she put it under a tree in the front yard. And she
Oh.
started sitting out there with her Bible and her coffee and praying that as people would walk by that they would start to come over. And she prayed for people, and in the beginning no one came over, but over time people started gathering around this turquoise table in her front yard, and she chronicles all the different things that came from that. And I think sometimes you have to be purposeful. That's why I like the fact that you came up with this plan to meet
Uh-huh.
people. I think sometimes we have to be the one to step out there or put ourselves out there, especially the way the world is now. Everyone thinks they're so connected because of
Mm.
social
Yeah.
media, but they're really not. I always say it's kind of like people are walking around with bubble wrap. They can see the other people, but they're kind of in their own space.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I love that illustration because I feel like I live in an apartment complex and
Hmm.
it's so funny. Even walking down the hallways, people don't even say hello anymore. They're just looking on their
Yeah.
phones, scrolling. And I've
Yeah.
made it an intentional moment of like, okay, when I'm passing someone in the hallway at my apartment complex, like, let me at least just say hello. How are you doing?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I've gotten to know my neighbors, but that's not as common as it used to be. And for a girl that grew up in a town where everyone waved to each other while driving, I'm just
Yeah.
not used to this. So and I think too, when I got into college, I thought that friends would just find me. And I finally was like, okay, God wants me to be an active participant in this story. I can,
Hmm.
make that first move and see what happens. But it's hard. It's hard. You feel like, okay, maybe everybody has all the friends that they need, but I think
Hmm.
everybody's looking for deeper community and not this
They
fake
are.
line where you're like, okay, I see like
Yeah.
the best moments of your life, but do I actually know you as a person?
Yeah, and that's the thing. We were created for community. We
Yeah.
were meant to be connected, and if you don't happen to have close relationships and you don't happen to go to a really healthy church where you can
Hmm.
become part of a small group or community group or something like that, you're not discipling anyone or being discipled. You have this longing and you don't really understand how to fill it because the
Yeah.
world around us doesn't do that. They drive right into their garage and don't
Right.
say hi to their neighbor.
Right. Yeah.
They buy things online and don't go out in public. They don't, maybe they take their dog for a walk, but
Yeah.
it's not the same culturally as it used to be. I mean, think about when Jesus came, he came then on purpose where people walked from village to village and town to town and knew each other and knew
Yeah.
your neighbor. Can you imagine
Right.
him coming now? Like, how would he even talk to
Yeah.
anybody? How would he even find the 12, right?
Right. Yeah. I think that's something that I'm trying to really work on too. Of like when I go to the grocery store, let me
Hmm.
talk to the woman or the man that's checking me out at the grocery store and just spend 2 minutes with them chatting instead of being on my phone or,
Yeah.
little moments like that because I have observed how in public places we just kind of put our heads down, get our things done, put our AirPods in and
Hmm.
keep moving and keep moving. And I want to be more intentional about being slower and
Yeah.
I have this tendency to, I want to check everything off the list, like I've said, but I have had these two songs on repeat lately. They're both called Not in a Hurry and just
Mm.
talking about how God wants us to be slow and how he wants us to move with intention and not with this rush tendency that we have. And so
Yes.
I'm really trying to work on that of like, okay, I'm not in a hurry. Like I'm not in a hurry for my life to be finished. Like I just need to sit here and be where God has me and if it's in the
Hmm.
grocery line, talking to the woman checking me out for 2 minutes, that's great.
Hmm.
Let's do that. Like, let's just spend time intentionally in these mundane, everyday moments going, okay, where can I see
Hmm.
God and where can I be shining his light today?
Yeah, amen. I'm the same way. I never pull my phone out when I'm in a store. I always look
Yeah.
for their name and talk to the person checking me out by name and ask questions. I have
Yeah.
conversations when I go out to eat. When the food comes, I've already gotten the person's name, made sure I remembered their name, tried to talk to them, and I say, "Hey, we're going to pray for our food. Is there anything we can pray for you?" And I've had some amazing conversations with people just from doing that. But I love that you keep talking about intentionality and
Yeah.
pace. Peace
Yeah.
comes from pace. God is I am, right? The moment that we're alive is right now.
Yep.
What we just talked about a minute ago is already our past. What we're going to talk about is our future. But right now is the only time you can do anything.
Yeah, yeah. I heard something at my small group recently, and a girl in my group said, we can't experience God in the past or the future, but only in the present. And I thought that was so
Uh-huh.
good because
Yeah.
I am so worried about what's going to happen next. I'm so
Mm-hmm.
future minded and oriented, and I have a tendency to miss what God's doing right here in the present. And so I
Yeah.
want to be focused on that because that's where He is. That's where He is with us in this moment.
Yeah, that's very wise. And I agree 100% because that's when life is right now, and right now, and I think that's what happened. I mean, just even think about like the examples from the Bible, right? The Israelites got tired of waiting and they
Yeah.
had all these things in their head and they end up making a golden calf,
Yeah.
and Moses is coming down where God wrote with his finger
Right.
what he wanted them to do. We're not really good on our own, and we're not good when we worry. That's why the
Right.
Bible says not to worry so many times, because God
Right.
knows our
Or Orion.
tendencies. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
And yeah, so I'm glad that you heard that and that you embraced that, because I think it's super important. Had I known some of the things we're talking about when I was your age, would have been really cool. But I
Yeah.
only met Jesus 24 years ago, and I'm 61, so do the math, right?
Yeah, that's awesome though.
Yeah. Yeah, but look what God's done in 24 years, right?
Right.
It's
Yeah. Yeah. A
amazing.
big
Yeah.
ministry in 24 years. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and completely different heart. Like that's the
Right.
thing. Like I'm, if you read my new book, you'll get to see a little bit of, where it came from, and that's why I share, because I want people to know God can, and He will, and He wants to
Yeah.
redeem and transform, the things that maybe got spoken over you. That was not His intention.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he has these plans for us and these purposes where he does intentionally deposit certain giftings and dreams and things into us for us to enjoy this
Mm.
abundant life he has for us.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, you had told me that you ended up, COVID hit, right? And
Right.
then you started asking God to open a door for a job,
Mhm.
and you did end up going somewhere. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I got to Nashville and started an MBA program at Belmont and then graduated August 2020. So I finished grad school online, which was really tough. Grad school's already hard, and doing it virtually at night for 3 hours a night was just kind of the worst. And so
Yeah,
made it out
sounds
of
like it.
grad school. Yeah, I made it out of grad school, graduated online, walked around my pool for our graduation ceremony because we couldn't have graduation in person, and didn't
Yeah.
have a job yet, and was worried about that. And it was so hard to find a job because everybody was applying for jobs. People had been laid off that had,
Yeah.
8 years of experience and were applying for roles that me with no experience I was applying for. And so it was just
Hmm.
hard. I interviewed a million different places. People would, ghost me after the interviews, and I just was really discouraged. And I finally said to God, okay, I don't need a lot of job options. I actually only just need one. So if you could just open one door, that's all
Mm.
I need. And I will go wherever that is and not question it. But I just need you to open one door because I feel like I, have done all the right things. I went to college, got the degree, and then what's going on now, God? Like, what do I do? So
Yeah.
I not too long after I prayed that prayer, during grad school, I had a mentor that they had paired me up with that worked for a nonprofit. And I've been volunteering with this nonprofit for a while. And she said to me, we're gonna have an opening at our nonprofit. You should apply for it. And
Hmm.
the nonprofit's called The Next Door. And I was like, oh, God, this is really ironic because I just did one door open and it's literally called The Next Door. That is,
Hmm.
comical. So I applied for the job and ended up getting it. And it is an addiction treatment center for women. And, I was, I think, 23 when I started. And I had never really been exposed to, alcoholism or addiction or any of that.
Hmm.
Seen things about it on the news, but never firsthand experienced it like that. And
Yeah.
I was so moved because a lot of our clients came from homelessness or really tough family situations. And I just had a new level of empathy that I had not had before. Now when I see
Mm-hmm.
people standing on the street corners with signs, I always make sure to look them in the eye and wave at them because,
Yeah.
that's where my clients used to be. And yeah, I just did not realize how much of a grip addiction can have on people. And it's not something
Mm-hmm.
that people can just quit overnight. Usually, there's so much that has to go into it. And
Yeah.
I'll never forget, right when I started. I met this client and she was about my age, and somehow we really connected and we talked to each other a lot. And she told me about how when she was 12 or 13, her dad sold her into sex slavery, and
Mm.
she had been in that for probably 5 or 6 years and finally escaped and made it out. And she had two children from that, and they had to be adopted out, and she didn't have custody. And it
Mm.
was such a crazy story to hear because you hear stories like that on the news, but you don't think it could happen to anyone you know. And of
Yeah.
course, girl and I are the same age, and when all of that was happening to her, I was playing with my American Girl dolls at home. So it just
Mm-hmm.
it
Mm.
really opened my eyes to how different, our lives
Yeah.
could be, so quickly. And yeah, that job really changed my life because I had no idea the struggles that people go through in
Yeah.
addiction. And it was hard. It was definitely a really hard job and hard at that age to see because I would see women that I, really connected with, and they were
Mm-hmm.
doing great in their program, and then I would hear that they relapsed and
Yeah.
were back on the streets or had passed away. And that was just heavy to hear because, you have such hope for these stories, and it
Mm-hmm.
just doesn't always turn out like you think it will. But yeah, it was a really hard first job, but I learned so much about the Lord through that job. And it was a
Mm-hmm.
faith-based ministry. And the first year I worked there, over 100 women came to know the Lord. And
Oh,
it
praise God.
Praise God. Yeah, it was,
Yeah.
I mean, it was awesome to see the way that the Lord moved in that
Mm-hmm.
space and how women had grown up with a really, really different version of God than I had, and that He was, this God that had caused addiction in their life and had caused hard things to happen to them, and they were bitter with Him, and then to see that bitterness turn into joy and to knowing Him
Mm-hmm.
and having hope
Mm-hmm.
again was just really
Yeah.
profound and beautiful. And I will be forever grateful that I had that experience. But yeah, it has completely changed my life because now when I hear about someone struggling with addiction or see someone on the streets that is trying to, scrape by, I have
Mm-hmm.
just a new level of compassion. And I'll never forget my one of my last weeks at that job. There's a Starbucks that's right next to our nonprofit, and I was walking across the street to grab a drink, and I had seen this man on the street several times, had always said hello to him, and I finally realized, well, I don't think I've ever asked him his name. And so I was walking to go grab my drink and I said, "Hey, how are you? I realized I don't think I've ever asked you your name. What's your name?" And he told me, and in the same breath, he pulled me in for a hug. And I totally
Oh,
didn't see that coming. And no one had asked him his name in, months. And he'd been standing on
yeah.
the street corner. And yeah, things like that have completely changed my life because I've never known people that have, struggled with addiction or homelessness. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's changed my life forever to have experienced that, especially at such a young age.
Yeah, and I think God was giving you a really in-depth lesson on intentionality, something that
Yeah,
I see as a theme throughout your story,
yeah,
um, that He has been teaching you to be intentional because of the kids you're going to end up working with, but also just in general, you know, as you said, every person that we meet, has a valid and valuable worth, and they
yeah,
don't get treated that way. So He grew your empathy and your intentionality. And, when you told the story about the man who, no one probably had asked him his name, just reminded me about like the woman with the issue of blood. Like, she's not
mm,
given a name, and
mhm,
it's because for 12 years she had this issue. So everyone that knew her by name eventually just called her the woman with so it's the man with
yeah,
addiction or the man who's homeless or And so, Jesus, when she reaches out and touches the hem of his garment, and she's immediately healed. When Jesus turns around and says, "Hey, who touched me?" It's not that He didn't know who, it's that He wanted her to know who she
mhm,
was, and He
mhm,
intentionally calls her daughter. That is the only person he calls daughter directly in the entire Bible, so
Wow.
that she knows that she is valued and she's part of the family, and
Yeah.
that her name is important to him, that she's family to him. And I think he wanted her to know, and he wanted all the people bustling around her to know.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true and so good because I definitely recognize that at my job too. I had several clients that have been in and out of jail or prison, and they were known by their numbers in jail or
Mm,
prison, and not by their
mm-hmm,
names. And so
mm,
for them to come to our nonprofit and be called by their names, to not be in, their prison garb, they were in regular
yeah,
street clothes. They, got their identity back, and
mm,
it really opened my mind to so much because
yeah,
we, I remember this one client, she had been in prison, and she was about to get out, and she did something to try to run away so she could stay because she was afraid of her ex-boyfriend trying to find her when she got out and harming her. And I just
mm-hmm,
thought, wow, you just really never know someone's story, because to be
no,
so fearful and to have no where to go, and you're afraid of someone finding you and hurting you, and the best result is to just go back to prison, is something that I
yeah,
just cannot fathom. And so, yeah, it just taught me a lot about we need to spend time with people going, okay, what is your name? Tell me a little bit about you, because
yes,
that really softens somebody to go, you
yeah,
know about me? Nobody's ever really
yeah,
asked me much about me before.
yeah. And here's the thing. Our experience is our experience, and we can't assume everyone else has had it. And especially those of us who have had really privileged lives, like
Hmm.
in comparison to what happens around the world. And as women, we didn't choose the time we were born in, the place we were born in,
Yeah.
any of that. God gifted us with that. But there are people in this same time and space who don't have rights as women, who don't have, and so especially just to be empathetic from that place, but to go
Mm.
further as you're going to every single person we encounter, you don't know anything about them.
Yeah.
You,
Yeah.
you can't assume by looking at the outside what's on the inside. And what
Right.
really gets me is that God doesn't even look at the outside,
Yeah, yeah, it's so true. Yeah.
you
And we
know?
even had clients, that would come in from, pretty wealthy families in Nashville that you would think their lives are perfect, but behind the
Mm-hmm.
scenes at their kids' soccer games, they were drinking a full
Mm-hmm.
bottle of wine out of a Stanley cup, or,
Mm,
going to work every day drunk. And,
mm,
you don't realize it could happen to anybody. Addiction doesn't just
yeah.
grasp somebody that's been homeless or has a really hard family
Yeah.
life. It could get anybody. And
Yeah.
to see the other side of it too, to see God, really love on these women and show them who He is and
Mm-hmm.
that He's there with them. Yeah, it just changed my perspective on
Yeah,
it
I can
forever.
hear how I can hear it. And unfortunately, I've had to deal with people in my life with
Yeah,
addiction, and I've had to, deal with having that kind of personality myself and not fall into addiction,
yeah,
And so it is something that more people need to be more aware of. There's so many different reasons how that ends up happening.
yep,
Now, in light of, we pray before we start. God always, leads us down a path, but I do want to still get to a couple of things that we haven't
yeah.
talked about yet. So, you ended up, after that job, you ended up working at Daystar for Kids.
Hmm.
This was also a time where your mom had been battling breast cancer, and that was really difficult for you.
Yeah.
Can you
Hmm.
tell us just a little bit of the transition to Daystar, kind of where you were at during that time, and then you were involved with sixth grade youth group, which for me seems like a full circle moment based on what you
Yeah.
went through in middle
Yeah, yeah.
school, you know.
It has been. Yeah.
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 So, yeah, tell us a little bit about how God got you to there.
Yeah, yeah. So I was at that previous job for 2.5 years, and I finally felt like, it was hard as a 23-year-old, 24-year-old to see this all the time, but I'm so glad I had this experience. But for my own mental health, I felt like it was time to go to a different job. And a lot kind of just happened at once. My mom was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I was also living in a house in Nashville where people had tried to break in multiple times, and had stolen my garage opener out of my car and come into our
Mm.
garage in the middle of the night. And I hit this point where I just was not sleeping through the night and probably didn't sleep through the night completely for over a year. And when you don't sleep, it really takes a toll on you. And I just kind of
Yeah.
felt like I was going crazy and needed to change up. And so I reached out to Daystar and I'd had a friend tell me, I think that'd be a great place to work. I didn't know anything about it. And I emailed them one night and they emailed me immediately back and said, "Can you come in today and talk to
Hmm.
us?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, sure." So I went in and then I came back, I think maybe a week later and met with the founder. And I still wasn't 100% sold, but when I met with the founder, because I just didn't know anything about them, and I met
Hmm.
with the founder and she, was like at the end, "Can I pray for you?" And I was
Mm.
like, that doesn't normally happen in a job interview, but yes, you can. And
Hmm.
she prayed and was like, "You know what, Lord, I hope Mary Spencer finds the right fit in a job." And I just want to say, I love her and I hope she works here. And, that was kind of the prayer. And I
Hmm.
opened my eyes and I was like, I'm going to work at this place. Like, I love
Oh.
that this woman's praying, just casually in an interview. I love the energy of it. I love being around
Hmm.
kids. And I just felt this piece of like, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be. So took the job there and moved into a new apartment. So I was kind of away from that environment that felt really unsafe. And my
Hmm.
mom had surgery and went through radiation and chemo. And, that was hard because I didn't live in my hometown and I was 7 hours away. But I'm so thankful that, she's in remission now. But yeah, there was just a lot that happened at once where I was kind of like, God, why is this happening? And why are things not getting better? It's just a snowball effect of my mom having
Hmm.
cancer, me not sleeping through the night. I went through a pretty tough breakup. Like there was just a lot. And I was like, what are you trying to teach me through this? Because I'm really tired. Like I just really want to
Yeah.
lay down and go to sleep. But that's been about, let's see, 2 years since that kind of all happened. And it's been really cool to look back and go, gosh, God has really worked through my life so much since then. Like, I love my job. I can't believe how much I love my job. And I wake up every day excited to go and hang out with kids and pop popcorn for them or fundraise so they can have a sliding scale for families that, need financial assistance. And I don't work on Fridays, so I get to write on Fridays. Like it's been such a gift to love my job, have Fridays off, love who I work with. My coworkers are some of my best friends, and
That's
uh,
awesome.
yeah, it's just been a total 180. And yeah, I got really involved at my church in the past year or so, and have helped with sixth grade youth, which has been, yeah, totally redemptive and full
Yeah.
circle and hilarious because,
Yeah.
I've got probably 15 girls that come regularly and they have all different personalities and I can see which ones, really gel well and which ones, I want to bring in and make sure they feel included. And they teach me
Hmm.
so much about the Lord because their childlike faith and wonder and questions. And I think
Yeah.
I might have told you this in our pre-recording call, but last semester, my first semester leading, we were going through Judges as a church. And so I
Hmm.
was trying to explain Judges to sixth graders when I don't even really understand myself. So that was a journey. But yeah, it's been really cool to learn about the Bible with them and
Yeah.
to be like, okay, I see you if you're really struggling at school and feel like you don't have friends because I've been there.
Hmm.
Like I
Yeah.
I really feel like I relate to them and people are always like sixth grade, like why did you want to do sixth grade? And I'm like, I can't imagine anything better. Like I
Yeah.
love them. Middle school is really hard for me. I want to be there for them.
Yeah.
They're exposed to so much more than I was exposed to. I want to be there for their questions and sit with them in that. And so it really has been a gift to be on the other side and get to give back and help with that because yeah, especially 2 years ago, I just didn't have capacity to give back like
Hmm.
that. I was just so burnt out, wasn't
Yeah.
sleeping. And God's really transformed my life to a place where I'm like, I really love where I'm at. I love
That's
being
awesome.
all in a church. Yeah, it's been really great.
And it's awesome for you to be able to pour into the people who are experiencing things that you experienced and to be able to be there for them. Sometimes we don't have something that we need, but if we can do something about that for others later, that's the best thing that you can do for your own healing and for them.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Now, I don't want to get through this without talking about your book. So you wrote a book,
Yeah.
and we'll be sharing in the show notes links to social media, links to the book. Tell us a little bit about the book. What's
Yeah.
it about?
hmm So it's called Cul-de-sac Crossroads. I grew up at the end of a cul-de-sac, and people would always call it a dead end. Mary Spencer lives at the dead end of that street. And for me, that felt like such a negative connotation of my childhood, of
Mm-hmm.
it was where my life really began. So I named the book Cul-de-sac Crossroads because I feel like God often takes us to places where it feels like a dead end, but really He's just rerouting us to a new direction. And
Mm-hmm.
I talk a lot about in the book about how we have to really know who we are or who God is before we know who we are. And that didn't really make sense to me until my 20s of, okay, I've got to have God
Yeah.
on the pedestal of my life before I have anything else going in my life. Because if I, orient my entire life around friendships, a job, a relationship, then I'm never going to be satisfied. I can only be satisfied when He's on the pedestal of my life. So
Mm-hmm.
book talks about that, about how I've really gotten to know the Lord for who He is in my 20s. And, there's different steps people can take to kind of, find that for themselves. I talk a lot about prayer and how that was a struggle for me for a long time. And I have a wall in my room of sticky notes of prayers that I pray for myself and for other people.
Mm-hmm.
How God's just really transformed the hard things in my life. I talk a lot about the time where I didn't sleep through the night for a while and everything that
Mm-hmm.
was going on in my life, how it kind of just compounded, and what I thought my 20s was going to look like looks very different. Like I thought I was going to
Yeah.
be married, having kids, and God has used my 20s in such a different way and in such a better way than I could have ever written. But my
Mm-hmm.
story looks nothing like what I thought it would, and I'm so, so grateful on the other side for that reason.
Yeah. And as soon as you started explaining what the book was about, Jeremiah 6 popped into my mind, where he says, stand at the crossroads and look, ask
Mm,
where the good way is, and walk in it, and I will give you rest for your souls. We're
mm,
meant to ask God kind of where to go next, what step to take. And when we're not doing that, we don't have that rest, we don't have that peace, and we're not really sure where we're going. So I love that. Now I have one more question for you. I always
yeah.
end every podcast with this question, just because I know we can't go back, but a listener could hear the wisdom from your answer and apply it to their life today. So if you could go back and give your younger self any kind of advice, what would that be?
Mm, I would say don't be afraid to be different. Don't be afraid to take risks, and to have compassion for yourself because you're doing a way better job at navigating middle school, high school,
Mm,
college, all the things than you think you are. It's
yeah.
hard. It's just hard being human, and give yourself some grace because yeah, I'm the hardest critic of myself, and
Hmm.
I wish I had given myself more compassion when I was younger, because I was doing the best I could.
Yeah, I'm going right back to the memory of you with the book
Yeah.
and being so afraid, and then having the authority figures, say, "Hey, you're not in trouble at all."
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely, very good advice. And I think all of us could take a little bit of that advice at this point. I think we all tend to beat ourselves up more than is necessary at times.
Yeah.
It's just the world we live in. There's just so much going on.
Right.
That's very good advice. I would definitely take it.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to take a minute to thank you for being willing to share your story. I'm so grateful you were able to come on and share with my audience. And I
Yeah.
hope you have a great day.
Thank you. And thanks for having me. This is such a joy to be with you.
Oh, yeah, I really enjoyed it so much, and it was my privilege. Thank you. Hey, so I just want to thank you so much for spending your time with me. And I want to challenge you to go out today and to just take notice and to stop and really look around and find at least good thing, one thing to be thankful for. You know, if you do that today, you're going to find so many more things tomorrow without even trying. Because once you start, you begin to see what's always been there. And if you need a refill, you can come join me again for another cup. Make sure to subscribe and have an awesome day and go be grateful.